Affinity is Monster Hunter's fancy way of saying critical chance. Of course, positive affinity means higher critical chance. Landing a critical hit deals 1.25 times the damage you would have dealt normally, or 25% bonus damage. Over the years, there have been skills added to the game to increase the likelihood of landing such critical hits. Skills like Weakness Exploit, which increase affinity when striking weak parts, Critical Boost, increasing the damage dealt by critical hits from 1.25 times to 1.40 times, or a 40% damage bonus. While you can play without having to use these skills, there's no denying that it plays an integral part of nearly every set made nowadays. But there has been an opposite of this. An antithesis to the affinity, the anti-crit. I'm not sorry for that joke. You must have already noticed that there are some weapons that have negative affinity. You'd be forgiven for thinking that having negative affinity just means that it was harder to get positive affinity. Nah, not in Monster Hunter. A weapon that has negative affinity will give you a chance to deal what's called a feeble hit. Feeble hits will deal 0.75 times, or 25% less damage than your base hit. You usually want to stay away from that because who would want to do less damage, right? Me, I'm that guy. Weapons usually have a benefit with a drawback attached. A weapon can never be too strong without taking something away. Take the Nargacuga weapons for instance. They have high base affinity and high white sharpness and purple sharpness levels. To offset that, they made the base attack low. On the other end, there are weapons that have a higher than average base attack, usually rounding out to the 340 to 380 range. These weapons are usually plagued by low elemental properties, terrible sharpness values, little to no decoration slots, negative affinity, and sometimes all of the above. There are exceptions to this case, but it's usually the premise that's followed. So what's the point of using these negative affinity weapons? Well, I think that's what the team for Generations Ultimate wanted to have an answer for, and they did that in the form of negative crit. Negative crit, or by its active name, bitter affinity, is a skill which gives negative affinity attacks a chance to be strong affinity attacks. For those of you wanting the numbers, a feeble hit will deal 25% less damage. With the negative crit skill active, you have a 25% chance for a feeble hit to become a critical hit and instead deal 200% damage. That's huge. Though it is 25% of a chance for a feeble hit, that also has a percentage chance to land. Two weapons that heavily benefited off of this in GU were the Bloodbath weapons and the Worn weapons. It's not that you couldn't use it with other weapon types, but for Bloodbath it has a varying high raw and white sharpness with negative 30% affinity, while the Worn has 380 raw, yellow sharpness, unfortunately, and 70% affinity. So how could this skill be useful outside of its home game? Well, while it was MIA in World and Iceborne, it came back in Rise as a rampage skill under the name Brutal Strike. Spoiler alert, it's useless. Brutal Strike has a 25% chance to deal 1.5 times or 150% bonus damage on a feeble hit. In addition to being significantly weaker than its cousin, Brutal Strike does not hold up strongly in a game where other rampage skills matter more, no negative skill points, and weapons with negative affinity that are usually negative 15 to 20% on average. Out of all 14 weapon types, there's only 3 weapons in Rise that have negative 30% affinity. This, paired with the fact that Weakness Exploit, Critical Eye, Critical Boost, and so many other critical related skills, as well as raw attack boosts, are all easily obtainable in Rise, and World, and Iceborne, so it leaves no room for skills like Negative Affinity to actually do what it does best. So how would Negative Affinity as a skill survive in a later installment of Monster Hunter, given how critical skills have absolutely devoured the way we deal damage in both 4th and 5th generation? There's several possible solutions, but ones that could actually have an impact, I'm not so sure. I'm not even going to suggest that they bring back the old skill point system because it seems that they're completely done with that, so there's no getting negative expert points. Increasing the negative affinity amount on weapons that already have it would just be going overboard, just the same as adding the skill back and not changing anything overall would still have the issue both GU and Rise have, where it's such a niche skill that it might as well not be there in the first place. The most reasonable conclusions I could think of would be to increase the percentage chance of a negative crit to activate. At least that way you have more chances of not only landing feeble hits, but also negative crit hits as well. In addition, there could also be a few sets with the skill or a specific monster whose set has negative crit and other raw skills that could benefit the weapons it creates. One that probably has extremely high raw, no elements, and something like negative 40% affinity. Anyway, I don't know how I turned a single thought into an entire video, but yeah, that's all I have for today, and I will see you tomorrow.